Hello and welcome. I'm Oksana Bonita. This is Midwest Crime Corner. Let's get into it. In today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Gypsyrose Blanchard, someone that I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with. Like many others, I was captivated by Gypsy's story when it first came out, but as time went on and her interviews that she's given, her post-release from prison, it's hard to be on Gypsy's side. And because of Gypsy's own contradictions and behaviors, that has made me have this perspective change on who Gypsy is and the crimes that she has committed. Let me preface this whole video, okay? I am not a doctor, a psychologist, coroner, crime scene detective, a geneticist. I just am somebody that has a lot of interests and knowledge and some of this stuff. So I've accumulated all this knowledge in my head. So I'm going to be looking into Gypsy's background, the events leading up to the unaliving of her mother, and some of the post prison release stuff that has gone on because it's been a little crazy. I've had people in my personal life question why I was even working on this case, given that she's already been tried, she's gone to prison, she served her time, she's out now. Why does it matter? Well, I just because all that stuff has gone on, I don't think that Gypsy and this whole case shouldn't be talked about because they should. There there's a big elephant in the room when it comes to Gypsy and this whole case. And if I didn't think that this case was worth talking about, I wouldn't have spent over a month doing research and working on this case. This is a very heavy case with a lot of moving parts to it. It's very complicated. I had to consume information on it, leave it alone, come back, rinse and repeat. It's just a lot to take in and to properly process because there's so much information out about the case. And like I said, there's a lot of moving parts to try to fully understand everything. And I didn't want to assume things because of the documentaries that are out, because of the show like The Act, Gypsy's own show that is out right now, things that she said. I wanted to look at everything, take it all in, and then make my own assessment about it as best as I could because I really want to accurately represent everything, again, best to my knowledge. So I urge you to also do research on this. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions. I think it is entirely too easy to look at this case from an emotional standpoint and to not look at it from a place of logic and reason. And that is my whole reasoning to make this video, because there's a lot of people that are looking at this case from an emotionally charged standpoint. And I get it. And it seems like every time I tried to work on this video, I kept getting delayed. If it wasn't something that was going on in my personal life that was delaying it, then it was Gypsy herself, because this girl has had no chill since she got out of prison. It's been good and annoying at the same time with the delays because there's so much new information that's been coming out since she got out of prison. I thought I was going to be able to wrap this script up a few days ago, and then oh, here comes Gypsy with her pregnancy announcement, and I had to I had to wait and see because there's been rumors that she was pregnant like months ago. It's like I said, it's a mess. It's a mess. Gypsy's a messy person.
Act the fool, girl. Act the fool.
Uh, and with that information, I'm done paying attention to Jip Jip and her media circus that she's created because it's too much, and I don't want to pay attention to it anymore. I've done enough of it over the last month.
You know what? I don't have time for this.
I probably will never cover this case again unless there's new information that comes out. Nicholas Godejohn has filed an appeal for a retrial, so we'll see if that gets any traction. He's able to actually get the appeal and have a retrial. The truth and accountability are extremely important to me, and that's also why I'm making this case, because that's not something that Gypsy is familiar with. If she truly wants to move forward with her life and to be a good mother to her child, or for any future children that she might end up having, she needs to change the path that she's on. If you watch my video on John Dillinger, you know that I went over his birth chart at the end of the video, and I will also be looking into Gypsy's birth chart here because I think it is relevant to the entire story, as well as numerology surrounding Gypsy and the day of the unaliving. I think that is not only relevant to the case itself, but it's also relevant to the things that are happening in Gypsy's life currently. And like I said, Gypsy's story is incredibly complex and it has a lot of aspects to it. It is easy to look at the information in Gypsy's story initially at a surface level, And to think that Gypsy only had one option, to think that DeeDee deserved what happened to her, or that Gypsy is a victim of Munchausen's by proxy. But when you start paying attention to all the details, it doesn't add up. A lot of it does not add up on DeeDee's part and on Gypsy's part. The tale of Gypsyrose Blanchard is truly that of two wrongs do not make a right. I will be getting into the crime scene photos, and they do get extremely gruesome, so I will include timestamps down below, so anybody who needs to skip forward ahead into the video, you can do so, and I will have countdowns beforehand, um, just to give you that time so you can click and go forward so you don't have to see those pictures. But I would not be showing those photos in this video if I didn't think that they were, again, extremely important to understanding Gypsy and the overall case of the unaliving of her mother. I really think the truth of what happened to DeeDee speaks through her body in the crime scene photos. All right, let's get into it. Gypsyrose Blanchard was born on July the 27th, 1991, to her parents Claudine and Rod Blanchard in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. Gypsy's parents started dating when her father was just 17 and her mother was 24. They dated for about 4 to 6 months before Claudine became pregnant with Gypsy. Out of obligation, her father felt like he had to marry Claudine since she was now pregnant with him, later regretting the decision and divorcing Claudine leading up to Gypsy's birth. Seemingly in an attempt to garner attention and sympathy from the man who no longer wanted to be with her, Claudine began orchestrating lies about Gypsy's health. When Gypsy was just 3 months old, DeeDee began telling Rod that Gypsy had sleep apnea, and then it was that she had epilepsy, and it only began to balloon from there. I do have to wonder if DeeDee was initially fueled by anxiety and fear of abandonment from Rod, and she just became so caught up in wanting Rod to be with her, and her lies basically became its own entity, and there was no turning back from it at that point. When I look at DeeDee, I see a woman in mental anguish. I see a woman who is silently suffering, but that doesn't excuse the lies that she told and the scams that she pulled off. In the same stroke, I don't think that DeeDee deserved what happened to her. DeeDee's own family has claimed that she would steal from them, and they assume to be retaliation for when she didn't get her way. It seems like she was arrested for using her grandfather's checkbook for writing bad checks, but I think that those charges must have been dropped because there wasn't ever a sentence for her crime, and all we have is this booking photo. But if Claudine was willing to do that to her own family out of anger and spite, like a child, I can easily picture her using Gypsy as a pawn or a weapon against Rod to try and manipulate him. At some point, DeeDee did have genetic testing done for Gypsy and discovered that Gypsy has a rare genetic disorder called a microdeletion, where she is missing a tiny piece in her chromosome sequence. Specifically, Gypsy has a microdeletion in the Q21.1 region. That would actually explain a lot of Gypsy's health issues that were going on with her initially, but that doesn't explain the other claims that DeeDee was making, like her asthma, her having leukemia, or even having MS. With the rare genetic condition that Gypsy has, it can cause learning disabilities, behavior problems, mental health problems, eating problems, and it can even cause physical abnormalities. Some people with this chromosome disorder have epilepsy, which I find interesting given that DeeDee lied to Rod and said that she had epilepsy when Gypsy doesn't have epilepsy. Had Dee already had the genetic testing done when she said that to Rod? I really have to wonder. And that makes me think that DeeDee used the lies and truth together to blend a more seamless lie that's more believable. Usually, the most convincing lies are mixed with the truth. Gypsy claims that she's part of the 75% of people that are living with her chromosome disorder that have zero symptoms or signs of it. But I don't buy into that claim given her distinctive facial features that are directly tied to that chromosome disorder. And again, not to mention her health problems that can directly be tied back to the chromosome disorder, like the issues that she had with her eyes that she needed surgery for to correct her lazy eye. Her salivary issues could have even been caused from the chromosome disorder, and even needing a feeding tube could have been traced back to the chromosome disorder. I've heard claims of DeeDee putting Oragel in Gypsy's mouth to make her drool in order to get the salivary glands removed. And that's just another thing that I do not buy into, because after looking into it, it's one thing to convince the doctor that she's producing too much saliva, but then you have to go through testing to figure out what glands are producing too much saliva. They need to look to see if it's really doing that. It usually involves a physical exam. Sometimes it includes a CT scan, and a surgeon is the one that deals with that. So you have to convince the doctor, and then you also have to dupe a surgeon into doing that. It doesn't seem really likely when you start thinking about all the parts of this case, thinking that DeeDee duped all these doctors. I don't think that's really the case. I think she was trying to do that, but I don't think that she was actually getting these doctors on board. It just doesn't make sense when you think about it. These doctors have licenses, they have oaths that they're supposed to uphold. I don't buy into all these doctors performing unnecessary surgeries on Gypsy. I think that the surgeries that happened to her were necessary, but only Gypsy really knows. Because you can't access Gypsy's medical records online because of HIPAA. So we can only go off of the information that we have found on the internet and things that Gypsy has said during interviews, during her trial, Nick's trial, in the documentary on HBO, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. So we can see a little bit of her medical records, like her 2007 neurologist report after she had testing done for MS. So in order for us to know the truth, Gypsy would have to release some or all of her medical records, which we have no right to that. She shouldn't do that. But it's hard to believe all of her claims when there's nothing to substantiate it when you again start really looking into this case. So it's just another way that Gypsy is able to control the narrative of this entire story. So there's a YouTuber that goes by the name of Fancy. I've not watched any of her videos, but she, I guess, became close friends with Gypsy and I believe her stepmother. Apparently, she was able to get close enough that Gypsy trusted her with her medical records for some reason. I don't really understand it. I'm not sure if she was able to obtain all of them or just some of them, but she was claiming that she has Gypsy's medical records and she was putting information out about the medical records online that puts Gypsy in a damaging light. Now Gypsy's suing her. So I can only assume that some of what that woman must have been saying is correct, but I don't know. That kind of stuff I'm going to take with a grain of salt, and that's why I didn't look into it because it's not gone to court or anything yet. So there's there's so much with this case, too many rabbit holes to go down. But it does pique my interest if what Fancy was saying is true. I couldn't find any hard proof that Gypsy had surgery done. She doesn't have scarring that you would see for somebody that has had their salivary glands removed, and she claims to have had all of her salivary glands removed.
How many surgeries did you have?
So many.
10, 20?
I'm pretty sure 30 more. Because I had multiple eye muscle surgeries, multiple leg surgeries, multiple throat surgeries. I don't have salivary glands.
I couldn't find anything in my research that suggests that that's a normal procedure to have done, to have all of them removed. It doesn't seem very likely.
Why the fuck you lying?
From my research, I could only figure out that Gypsy must have had Botox injected into at least one of her salivary glands to try to curtail the saliva production. I don't know anybody who's had their salivary glands removed. I have all of mine. So I don't know if that's a normal thing to have all of them removed. Everybody that I've seen online that has said that they've had theirs removed says that that's not normal to have all of them removed, and they don't think that's even possible to have all of them removed. So if you or someone you know has gone through salivary removal surgery, tell me down below if that's normal, because it seems suspicious. So it's just one of many red flags for me when you start looking into this case. So if Dee was lying about Gypsy's real health problems that are tied to her genetic disorder, I would think that she would have talked about it more. It's just odd to me that she didn't use the genetic disorder more as a basis for, this is what's wrong with Gypsy. It's like she would mention it, but it was just such a small thing because then she was leading with like, oh, well, she's got leukemia, she's got MS, she's got asthma. It didn't take the forefront like the fake illnesses that Gypsy had. And I think she didn't do that simply because what was really wrong with Gypsy, it wasn't life threatening. It wasn't going to garner enough sympathy and attention for them like the fake illnesses would. And you cannot lead with the truth when you need to benefit from lies. In an interview with Dr. Phil while she was still incarcerated, Gypsy tells Dr. Phil that her mother told her that her head was too small, which is actually tied to her chromosome disorder, if that is the case. But the way in which Gypsy says this, it's like she's not aware of anything tied to her chromosome disorder. She says it like it was just another one of DeeDee's lies. And looking at Gypsy's baby photos, it was obvious to me at first glance that there's something going on with her genetically. I don't mean that to be rude, but just looking at her baby photos, something's a little unusual looking at her. She looks smaller than typical babies. Everything about her looks tiny, almost frail, all of which can be tied back to her chromosome disorder, which makes me wonder, how well does Gypsy understand her chromosome disorder? Or maybe she's pretending like it doesn't affect her as much as it does, because she's trying to lead a normal life. Regardless of what was lies and what was the truth, most of Gypsy's life has been centered around her health. I have several chronic health disorders and a neurological disorder. My health has greatly impacted my life, and at times it has felt like it has overtaken my life. And so I can really empathize with Gypsy's need for wanting to be normal and to live outside of her health issues. I think that is where so much of this is tied up at. It's all tied up in Gypsy's health and Gypsy wanting to live a normal life. And remember how I said that mental health and behavior problems can be a symptom of her genetic disorder? Gypsy's own behaviors leading up to her mother's murder, and even how she is post release from prison, I think it's evident that she has some mental health problems. I'm not going to attempt to guess what could possibly be going on with Gypsy, but it is obvious to me that there is something going on with her. Some people may want to chalk it up to her being raised by DeeDee, the environment that DeeDee raised her in.
Eve was weak.
No!
Eve was weak.
No!
Eve was weak. Say it.
No,
Mama.
Mama!
Say it.
And that very well could be true. But I think the root cause of it is the chromosome disorder, and probably living with Dee only exacerbated that. But Gypsy is still able to hold Gypsy accountable. She can't use being raised by DeeDee as a reason for her behaviors or her lack of accountability forever. At some point, Gypsy needs to be honest with herself and to take accountability. DeeDee has been dead for 9 years as of this video. Gypsy's growth is on her at this point. By the time Gypsy was around 7 or 8 in the latter 90s, Claudine was starting to claim that Gypsy was not getting enough calories and that she had asthma, she had leukemia, she had the chromosome disorder, and that she couldn't walk because she had muscular dystrophy. By this point in her life, Gypsy was using a wheelchair that she didn't need, and she even had her feeding tube. Due to her chromosome disorder, it makes sense that Gypsy would need a feeding tube. With her microdeletion, it can make it hard to swallow and to eat and to keep food down. So that could explain why she had it in the first place. I don't think that it was something that was just done to her. With the knowledge of her chromosome disorder and looking at her medical procedures, again, it all seems like the medical procedures tie back directly to that chromosome disorder. What I believe to be another lie that was told by Gypsyrose during her Dr. Phil interview, like I mentioned a little bit ago, she says that she had 30 surgeries done.
How many surgeries did you have?
So many.
10, 20?
I'm pretty sure 30. 30 more. Because I had multiple eye muscle surgeries, multiple leg surgeries, multiple throat surgeries. I don't have salivary glands.
And that just doesn't seem like it was true when you look into it. Again, the only way to really know that is if Gypsy would release her medical records, which I don't think she'll ever do that. But there isn't any evidence to suggest that she actually had 30 surgeries. And when you look into her teeth being removed and cap, it seems like Gypsy liked to sneak junk food at night when DeeDee was asleep. And that is probably more likely what led to the removal of her teeth, because she rotted them out from eating junk food and not brushing her teeth. Obviously, it could have been by medicine doing the rotting, but I have a hard time believing that as well, given the evidence, and especially when you get into the crime scene photos, because I don't think Gypsy was actually taking the medicine that she was prescribed outside of abusing her mom's pain pills that she openly admits to doing. So I will let you draw your own conclusion with that. The only thing that I can say that was unnecessary, that was done to Gypsy, is the muscle biopsy for MS. And she had that done when she was around 16 years old. And I say unnecessary because she didn't have MS. She doesn't have MS. And DeeDee knew this, but that isn't a sign of Munchausen's because DeeDee wasn't making Gypsy sick. There's other fictitious disorders, and I will address that a little bit later. But the doctor didn't know that Gypsy was faking her symptoms during the exam, so the doctor can only go off of the testing that is done. So if she's hitting positive on some things in the test that's indicating MS, what is the doctor going to do? They're going to test for MS. And the only way to rule out or rule in MS is through a muscle biopsy or a spinal tap, where they take fluid out of your spine to see if there's a certain protein in it that is present in a spinal column when you have MS. My neurological disorder mimics MS, and I had to go through similar testing that Gypsyrose had to go through, if not the same tests that she had to go through, aside from the muscle biopsy. It's all very specific to how you walk, how you rotate your hips, your legs, having nerve conduction testing done. They test the strength in your hips. They test the strength in your legs, even your grip strength in your hands. If you truly are sick and you think that you have a functional problem going on with your brain and your body, it's a very scary thing to experience. I thought that I had MS leading up to my neurological appointment. So if you're in that space, you were very scared and you were very ready to get any and all testing done to find out what the heck is going on with you. At least I was. And I guess luckily for me, my testing came back in the office that it probably wasn't an MS, it was something else going on. And so my neurologist was quickly able to figure that out. So I didn't have to have, anything painful done like a muscle biopsy or a spinal tap, which brings me right back to Gypsy faking her symptoms so well that she fooled a neurologist into thinking that she had symptoms of MS to the point to where they needed to do a muscle biopsy on her. And again, it is one thing for Dee to claim, Gypsy has X, Y, and Z wrong with her. It's a whole other thing to get her to fake those symptoms so well that she's gonna fool the doctor. But what Dee was doing, it doesn't quite fit Munchausen's. It fits another fictitious disorder. So DeeDee wasn't making Gypsy sick. She was just making her fake symptoms in order to manipulate people so they could get benefits and free stuff, free trips, free items, whatever they could get for free. Money, you name it. That's abuse, but it's not quite as complex as Munchausen's is, because again, DeeDee wasn't doing things to make Gypsy sick. She wasn't faking or tampering with IVs. She wasn't messing with blood or urine samples, nothing like that. But what Dee was doing does fit the terminology for malingering. So specifically, she fits what is called partial lingering or even pure malingering because of Gypsy's chromosome disorder. So because Gypsy has something that's wrong with her, they're using that as the basis, and then they're making it seem like it's worse than what it is, making it seem like she has other health problems that are wrong with her that are just not there. But it was all done for personal and financial gain.
I always knew that I didn't need the wheelchair
How did you know that?
because I could walk.
You and your mother obtained any kind of advantage by you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
What kind of advantage did you obtain?
Financial, charity.
Financially mean money.
Yes, sir.
Did you obtain money as a result of you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
And you don't see that in Munchausen's. It's really all for attention. So Gypsy sees that neurologist. The test results come back negative, that she does not have MS. DeeDee rebuked the whole thing. She didn't like the results because the results are not what she wanted. The neurologist noted in Gypsy's chart that Dee was not an accurate historian and that Gypsy might be a victim of Munchausen's by proxy, but that she did have other health issues going on, which would explain some of her symptoms, but that her mother was refusing to accept the fact that she did not have MS. And like I said, there's no faking MS. You either have it or you don't. You can't fake a test that shows a protein in your spinal column or your muscle atrophying. So good on that doctor for noting something was going wrong. I don't think he could quite put his finger on what was going on, and Dee took Gypsy away from that doctor, and they went and found somebody else. During that same interview with Dr. Phil, Gypsy admitted how well of a liar she is and how she can do it without a conscience.
She taught me how to be a good liar, a very good liar without any conscience.
Remember that. When I was looking into this, I was kind of taken back by just how much Claudine put into this image of Gypsy being ill, mostly because of the amount of wheelchairs that she seemed to have. Claudine didn't work, so the only money that she had coming in was through their grift that they had going on with Gypsy's illness, any donations that came in, and child support that was given to her by Rod. I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user, so for me, that means I use a cane most of the time getting around until my symptoms get bad enough that I need the wheelchair. Especially long distance walking is absolutely out of the question for me anymore. My wheelchair is electric and they aren't cheap. It was about 3 grand that we had to pay out of pocket. And I was very lucky that we were able to even get it because my insurance would not pay for it. I noticed that most of Gypsy's wheelchairs were manual. The price difference isn't too horribly different. Like this one, I'm not sure if this one is her first one, but it had to have probably been around a grand new, maybe $800 used. She is pictured in an electric one, like this one, which easily runs about 2 grand at minimum. She is pictured in a few other ones that look slightly cheaper, maybe under a grand new, but still probably around $600 to $800. And the whole reason that DeeDee even said that Gypsy needed a wheelchair was because of a motorcycle accident where Gypsy fell off of her grandfather's motorcycle. And I love how it's described as an accident. I mean, I guess that is true and to an extent, but it's the implication of it mixed with the sudden need and usage of a wheelchair. It sounds way worse than what it was. When you hear she was in a motorcycle accident and now she's in a wheelchair, like where does your brain go? Because mine goes to a pretty serious ass accident that didn't actually happen. From all accounts, Gypsy just simply fell off of the back of the bike. I don't even think it was going, and she scraped her knee. While road rash can hurt, it's not going to stop you from being able to walk and to need the use of a wheelchair. It is reported by Gypsy's family that when she was younger and she was first using her wheelchair, that she would get out of it at family functions, get her cousins in it, and she'd push them around, causing DeeDee to holler at her to get back in the chair. I just find it so interesting how committed DeeDee was to living this illusion. It's like she saw this opportunity to make Gypsy appear more sickly, and boy, did she run with it, especially after the Hurricane Katrina scam. I think DeeDee thought that she could cash in on her daughter forever because nobody was stopping her. And if they tried to question her, she'd just move and start all over again. After Hurricane Katrina, Gypsy and DeeDee moved to a home that they rented in Aurora, Missouri. In 2008, Habitat for Humanity gave DeeDee and Gypsy the infamous pink house, garnering them local media attention. The news segment is short, but I think it does show a lot. If you notice during the interview that Dee and Gypsy gave, Dee is seen holding Gypsy's hand, and you can see her press her thumb into Gypsy's hand, and I think it's to get her attention because Gypsy briefly looks over at her. According to Gypsy, Dee used physical abuse to control her. During interviews, appointments, or just talking with others, if Gypsy didn't say the right things, Dee would squeeze her hand tightly to let her know that she said something wrong. When they were alone, Dee would strike her with an open hand or a coat hanger. Their nonverbal communication is interesting to see. I don't doubt for a second that Dee was using the hand-holding tactic to control Gypsy in the narrative of her illnesses. Hitting her, I'm not so sure about, and that's not to say that it didn't happen, because it absolutely could have happened. But given all the other lies that have been peppered throughout this entire story, it makes me question it. I have to question almost everything that is said in this story once you get into it. Any victim of childhood abuse knows how complex and insidious it can be. So I don't want to minimize any abuse that she did go through, but again, there's such a big elephant in the room, it's hard not to question it. I want to believe Gypsy, I do. I really do. But again, like I said, given how many times she's lied in order to make her mom look worse, it's hard to believe everything that she says. But again, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. I want to believe her. I do. I want to believe. Don't get me wrong, though. The things that DeeDee did are absolutely inexcusable. I don't think that Dee was a good person at all. Definitely not like how she led on to be publicly. But I don't think there's enough evidence to support that Dee deserved the death that she was given, and that Gypsy had no other option than to kill her mother. I think that is so absurd. After the murder of Dee, the investigation was launched, and during the investigation, they discovered that Dee had forged a birth certificate, changing Gypsy's birth date on it to try and make the grift last longer for them. Gypsy later stated that she was unsure of her age for about 14 years. Dee would sometimes claim that Gypsy's original birth certificate had been lost in the flooding of Hurricane Katrina, but that wasn't true. She had the real copy of the birth certificate kept right next to the fake copy of the birth certificate with the altered birth date. I'm so confused why she thought that that was a believable lie, because even if she had really lost the birth certificate in the flooding, the state would still have copies of that on record. So she could have just gone to the health department at some point and requested a new copy of her birth certificate to be made. I'm so surprised that nobody ever pointed that out to Dee before. And if she lied about the birth certificate, and if she's lying about Gypsy's health, I really have to question if they lost any medical records or documents in any flooding during Katrina. Neither DeeDee or Gypsy ever really give a clear account of them living through Hurricane Katrina. It's all a vague mentioning that they lost their house, it flooded, and they left. It's never really about their actual account during the storm and the flooding. I think Dee just used Hurricane Katrina and the flooding as another opportunity to make them look more sympathetic and for them to capitalize on other people's real struggles, their traumas, and their recovery, all for them to benefit for themselves. If I am right, I am so disgusted and it honestly pisses me off. Because if you know even a little bit about Hurricane Katrina and just the impact on New Orleans alone, I am sure you probably feel the same way. They didn't go through what so many people had to go through. And to benefit from a lie about being a Hurricane Katrina survivor in the New Orleans area, it leaves me speechless. Dee liked to mix the truth in with her lies, and that's what makes her seem so believable to so many people. I do believe that they lived in the area. They lived in Slidell around the time of Hurricane Katrina, but lose all of their documents, I don't believe it. Not with how Dee was. Dee was very meticulous, just like how Gypsy is very meticulous about things, very methodical. They plan things out. It's obvious that she had Gypsy's original birth certificate, so they were living in Slidell, which is a little bit north of New Orleans, and Slidell was actually in the direct path of Katrina, unlike New Orleans was. But the difference in elevation and how that levee broke, you don't see the kind of flooding like how you saw in the lower Ninth Ward. I don't want to minimize what happened in Slidell because it was really bad. They did have really high storm surges, like I think 17 feet high was recorded with some of the storm surges. So it's a little bit lower than what you see in the lower Ninth Ward. So another red flag for me is that investigators couldn't even confirm that Gypsy and her mother were victims of Hurricane Katrina because there was nothing to document that they were. They didn't sign up for anything to receive relief aid. So it seems like sometime around Hurricane Katrina, DeeDee and Gypsy had been staying in or around the Ronald McDonald House in Slidell, but it seems like maybe they were kicked out of there. It was kind of hard to figure out. Everything around this time period is kind of murky. I don't know, it makes me question a lot of stuff. I think that there's information that Gypsy knows and she's not going to be forthcoming with it because she knows how bad it would make her and her mom look. And I think that is another theme throughout this whole story, that Gypsy knows more than she's willing to let on. Either she is skewing what really happened in order to paint a slightly different picture, or she's just outright lying for the same purpose of controlling the narrative. I think, though, just like her mother, Gypsy is very good at mixing the lies with the truth. I really have to wonder if Gypsy liked all the attention, all the trips, the gifts, that special attention, all for her. It very much mirrors how she's been acting since she got out of prison.
Welcome back, Queen Serena.
The thing about Ken and I is we have a long history. No matter what relationships outside of that bond is made, you keep coming back to that same person. I'm like a free pony running through the fields, and he is my other free pony running through the fields with me.
I've got the stride of a gazelle. A beautiful, beautiful gazelle person.
Oh, honey, I am so not threatened by you. My man wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. You're just mad because I have a Chad. And last time I checked, you don't have a man. So, looks like you're the one that's panini pressed. Call a spade, honey. Keep making content.
No. I would like to think that maybe Gypsy feels guilty for the things that she acquired while she was with her mother doing this whole grifting thing. I think she was a little more complicit with it than what she wants to let on.
Did you and your mother obtain any kind of advantage by you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
What kind of advantage did you obtain?
Financial, attention, charity. I always knew that I didn't need the wheelchair.
And how did you know that?
Because I could walk.
You know, I would be willing to look past that if she wasn't acting how she's acting. Again, accountability and truth. If she could just take some accountability, if she could just be truthful with herself, the very least, change her actions, the path that she's going down, I feel like I could respect her more, but I can't with everything that she's doing and saying. It's hard. It is very hard.
Call a spade, honey.
A lot of what Gypsy does feels like it's a deflection, or she's just trying to gain sympathy. Still, she plays the victim card a lot, and I find it funny because again, if she wants to heal, she can't be doing that. We we know what happened with your mom. We know. Stop talking about it, because now we can't stop talking about it, because you can't stop talking about it. It's Oh man. So Gypsy saying that she knows what she did wasn't right. It seems like she said it because it's something that she had to say, because it's something that she knows that's what people want to hear from her. But it doesn't feel genuine. It does not feel genuine. It is very important to listen to what Gypsy says and then watch what she does, because they contradict themselves all the time. Even her own words will contradict other words that she says. The interviews she gives, if you compare what she testifies on trial, at her trial, at Nick's trial, and you compare it to her interviews while she was in prison and since she's been released, there's a lot of contradictions to what she says. Even in her police interrogation, it's never ending. And I think there's so many inconsistencies because she cannot keep up with all the lies. It's too much. It's too much for her to juggle.
Did you ever run away?
Yes, sir.
When did you, and by run away, I mean from your mother.
Yes, sir.
When did you run away?
In the spring of 2011.
Did you tell Nick about that?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever consider running away after that? After you ran away in 2011?
Yes, but I knew that it would end badly. I feared more than anything that if I ran away, that things would be worse for me at home.
Oh my God, stop fucking lying.
I do think though, like if Gypsy could change how she's acting, all the attention that she's getting right now, if she just shut all that off, I could respect her more. I do think if Gypsy did enjoy the perks that she was getting when she was with her mom, if she's harboring any guilt over that, let it go, girl. Let it go. If for some reason, Gypsy, you were watching this, just let it go. You are holding on to some baggage, and it is going to ruin things for you. It's okay if you like those perks then. It is okay. I don't think you're a bad person for liking those things at that time. It's what you're doing currently that is a problem. So while growing up, since 2001, Gypsy had attended several sci-fi conventions. There it was easy for Gypsy to wear a costume and seamlessly blend into the crowd in her wheelchair. And this was one way for Gypsy to be able to socialize with other people. By the time 2011 rolled around, Gypsy had run away from home. She had found out that she was 19 or 20. She discovered her insurance card with her real birth date on it, and she ran away to be with a man that she had met at one of those conventions. So DeeDee was able to track her and the man down and provided the man with the fake birth certificate to try and manipulate him into thinking that he was with an underage girl and that she was going to call the cops. So after DeeDee retrieved Gypsyrose and brought her back home, Gypsy claims that Dee took a hammer and smashed her laptop and threatened to do the same thing to her fingers.
Smash, smash, smash!
After that, Gypsy claims that Dee handcuffed and restrained her to her bed for 2 weeks, along with depriving her of food. Although, during the police investigation after Dee's death, it should be noted that none of the items that Gypsy says her mother used to restrain her were found in the home. It should also be noted that Dee was unable to properly care for her house at this point because of her health decline, and she had become somewhat of a hoarder by the time the murder occurred in 2015. She was spending more time in bed and she just wasn't feeling like her typical self. She had diabetes, and it's possible that she had a few other health problems, and she was needing help from Gypsy to get around the house. She was also using a wheelchair. The infamous wheelchair in the bathroom photo, I believe that is actually Dee's wheelchair that she was using and not Gypsy's, like it's popularly theorized. And so that makes me question if that part about DeeDee restraining Gypsy to the bed for 2 weeks was fabricated. I know this incident is said to have happened about 4 years prior to DeeDee's murder. Even so, 2 weeks is a long time to be restrained to a bed. I know that may not seem like a long time, but that is a long time when it comes to muscle wasting. Laying in a bed for 2 weeks restrained with little to no food, little to no leg movement, arm movement, that undoubtedly would cause problems for Gypsy walking. I guarantee you that if that had happened, Gypsy would have needed physical therapy to be able to walk after getting out of that bed. Not to mention, laying in a bed like that for 2 weeks, that would most likely cause some bed sores.
I better.
I think everything else about that story is true. I think DeeDee went and retrieved her. I think she lied with the birth certificate. I think she took Gypsy back home and threatened her, but restrained her to a bed for 2 weeks like that, depriving her of food. I don't buy it. Gypsy also claimed that after that incident, DeeDee told her that she had gone to the police department and made a police report saying that Gypsy was mentally incompetent and they would not believe her if she left and went to the police and said that there was any abuse going on at home, leading Gypsy to claim that she didn't believe that she could go to the police at that point because she didn't think that they would believe her. My problem with this is if Dee really had made a report, I would think that she'd have a copy of it because again, she loved her documents, she made multiple copies of things. I would think that she would undoubtedly have a copy of this police report, especially if she wanted to hold it over Gypsy's head. Gypsy could be quite sneaky when Dee went to sleep, and she would sneak around the house and go through her paperwork sometimes. At least on one occasion she did this. So I would think that if she'd already done that before looking through the paperwork, wouldn't she do that again to confirm or deny that Dee had done that? If she was really wanting to escape the abuse, I don't know. It's another thing that I have to question about this story. It just seems odd to me, especially how she had ran away from home before, and she actually ended up running away from home again sometime after that. It's just, it's another odd thing with the story that just doesn't add up. To me, it seems like the basis for Gypsy trying to justify not going to the police and just murdering her mom. In 2012, Gypsy was still finding access to the internet, and she was even using her own cell phone. At some point, she was able to get a burner phone from Walmart, so Gypsy was able to do a lot of things behind DeeDee's back, which is another red flag for me. How and why would she do all of that, but not try to leave in a safe manner? And she was even letting people know that she could walk. It was a very, very small and select few people that knew, but she was telling people this. The guy that she ran away with initially, he knew that. It's just another thing you have to question. In the HBO documentary, Mommy Dead and Dearest, Gypsy was serving her prison sentence when she was interviewed for that. And during the interview, Gypsy states that she wasn't 100% honest with her attorney or even with the documentary crew. And I was so shocked when she just openly admitted to that. How are we supposed to believe any or all that she says? And she can just lie at the drop of a hat without a conscience. If she was fine with lying to her attorney, I have to assume that she lied under oath too during her trial and Nicholas's trial. In her testimony during Nick's trial, she admits that she always knew that she could walk and that she was in a wheelchair to garner sympathy and attention and free stuff, trips, items, whatever, money, just whatever could benefit her and her mother. That's what the whole thing was about, which is another red flag for me. There's so many red flags for me in this case. And it makes me think that Gypsy was more willing than what she will admit and more complicit in her mom's schemes in order for them to benefit from it. There are several times during Nick's trial where Gypsy lies and Nick's lawyer is so incompetent for Nick that he never calls out these lies. Like how Gypsy states that she never had a boyfriend before Nick, but right before that, she admits to running away from home on 2 occasions to be with the same man that she was seeing that she met from the sci-fi convention. So it was in 2012 when Gypsy met Nicholas Godejohn online through an online dating site. Gypsyrose found him on there and she was the one who pursued him. And eventually she convinced him to take it public to Facebook. And that's where she started making a bunch of different Facebook accounts. She had 5 Facebook accounts altogether at some point. Seems like she'd make them, then deactivate them, make a new one. I don't really understand it. In addition to that, Gypsy was sending photos and videos to Nick that were very sexual and highly suggestive. I think in an attempt to express herself, but more importantly, it was a way for her to manipulate and control Nicholas into doing what she wanted. Gypsy coached Nick into saying a lot of the things that he ends up saying and doing throughout their texts and, well, carrying out the unaliving of her mother. And Gypsy would have these video chats with Nick, and that's where she would coach him on things to say and do. I think she did this in order to paint Nick in a bad light and to make it seem like Nick was the one that was initiating all this when it was actually Gypsy who had done it. Like, I won't get into all the stuff between Nick and Gypsy because it's a lot. But if you're wanting to check that out, Becca Scoops on here, she's a YouTuber. She does a fantastic job at covering many of the aspects between Nicholas and Gypsy and like the whole case, multiple videos. So if you're interested in learning about that a little bit more, you should probably go check out her channel. I'll put a link. Any content creator on YouTube that I mentioned in the video, I will link them down below so you can go check out their channel and check out their videos. But for context, in one of the videos that Gypsy sent to Nick, Dee was out of the house and Gypsy had gone into Dee's bedroom, stood over Dee's bed and filmed, like pointing down, looking at the bed, and was making stabbing motions over top of where DeeDee slept in bed. In another video that Gypsy sent to Nick following that video, she said a lot of incriminating things, but what was most notable was that she said, "We are together, and together we are going to go on a crime spree, and we're going to rob, we're going to steal, and we're going to do all of these things because you are my perfect match." In another video, Gypsy tells Nick, "If you love me, you will do everything I tell you to do." And that last part was in reference to the stabbing video that she did over top of her mom's bed. So she's commanding Nick to take her mom's life. Gypsy made it very clear that there was no other option. Nick asked her several times, like, can't we just run away together? Like, can we not do the whole unaliving of your mom part? But Gypsy was very insistent. Like I said, there's no other way for them to be together unless DeeDee's life ended. And I think that is also what this case really boils down to. Gypsy wanted to have a normal life. She wanted to be set free. She wanted to be around the boys, and basically DeeDee's life ended because of a boy. I think that was the other large contributing factor to this entire thing. Gypsy wasn't allowed to do whatever she wanted. She wasn't allowed to date whoever she wanted, and DeeDee stood in her way. So Godejohn has a lengthy history with mental health issues. During his mother's police interview, she stated that he's on the autism spectrum and that doctors told her that he wouldn't mentally or emotionally mature past the age of 15. I think Nick plays such an important part in this whole story. And without Nick, Gypsy has no one to pin the blame on. It's glaringly obvious looking through the text messages between Gypsy and Nick that she was manipulating him. And I don't think that Gypsy ever truly loved Nick. I think that she loved the attention that he gave her and the prospect of him carrying out her plan. And the texts from Gypsy are so odd when you look through them. Her basically having these strange meltdowns and pressuring Nick into going along with the plan so that they could be together. It's so sick. It's nauseating. Her flipping back and forth and saying things like, "I'm me again," and talking down to him during some of these outbursts as well. It's really disgusting. It was hard to read the messages between them because of how she was talking to him and treating him. It's honestly heartbreaking. A lot like how DeeDee used Gypsy, I fully believe that Gypsy was in turn doing the same thing to Nick. It's generational trauma repeating itself at its finest. So Gypsy has these meltdowns and these freakouts on Nick basically, and she flips a switch and she's like, "I'm me again." And then she starts hitting him with love bombs and he falls right back in line. And that is like textbook abuse and manipulation. And this happened several times leading up to Dee's murder. And I felt so bad for Nick reading these messages because he's very sweet towards her, and it's obvious that he loves and cares for her a lot. I don't think if Gypsy ever really loved Nick, she wouldn't have put him in the position to take her mother's life, not to mention how quickly she threw him under the bus during her police interrogation. On June 2nd, 2015, Gypsy messaged Nick saying, "I'm 100,000% in, hun." I think she's implying the murder of her mother. She's all in to be in the relationship with Nick, and in order to do so, she has convinced herself and Nick that DeeDee's life has to end in order for that to happen. At Nick's trial, Gypsy openly admits that she talked him into it, meaning that she talked Nick into committing the murder. A lot of what is said between these two is some of the cringiest stuff I've ever read in my entire life, and I like Twilight. And this is my other problem that I have with Gypsy post-release from prison. It really irritates me and a lot of other people how she's just out here trying to stay relevant, trying to be in the spotlight, and trying to be a celebrity. It's really odd, too. Like, what are you doing? The only reason why you are famous, why anybody has your name in their mouths, is because you orchestrated the murder of your mother. Just the fact that she can be acting the way that she's been acting post-release from prison says everything I think about her. And it's another major red flag for me. It makes me think about Casey Anthony. I mean, yeah, she did come out or whatever with an interview or that documentary, Where the Truth Lies a few years ago. But initially, Casey Anthony went into hiding for a very long time. And I think that's because she knew better. She knew what she did, and she knew the public's perception of her. Gypsy was giving interviews while she was in prison. She's had no chill. And out the gate from her release, she had a TV show already lined up. She had interviews. She had podcasts all lined up for her. She was even on an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Why? It makes no sense. I'm just taken aback by Gypsy's lack of self-awareness. Putting the murder of her mother aside, just these texts alone between her and Nick, being out in the public, if that were me, that would have been enough to make me go into hiding for the rest of my life. I have to assume that Gypsy has to have some type of hype men around her with dollar signs in their eyes, or she has some narcissistic qualities. It's probably a little mixture of both, would be my guess. Continuing reading through Gypsy and Nick's text, once you get to the day and especially the night of June the 9th, just hours before DeeDee's murder, they're just casually discussing the details of it. It's such as Gypsy's telling him how to open up the back door because it's a little wonky, and she's even telling him about the gloves that she's gonna hand him, the knife when he comes in the door, and then she goes on to tell him that she's gonna be shaving her freaking legs and painting her nails and getting ready for him while he's in the next room stabbing her mom like a pig. And it's the same pink nail polish that we see on her mom's nails during the crime scene photos, and the same pink nail polish that we see on Gypsy's fingers during her police interrogation photo, which was taken almost exactly 1 week after the murder. It's just, it's so sick. I have no words for that other than I'm disgusted. And just the sheer audacity. Gypsy's very brazen.
Call a spade, honey.
So in the police interrogation, the photos that they took of Gypsy's hands 6 days after Dee's murder, you can see the bright pink nail polish again. More importantly, on Gypsy's knuckles, on her index knuckles and on her middle fingers, on those knuckles, there's what looks like healing bruising. And on the knuckle of her right hand, on her middle finger, it looks like there's a little cut that is healing. So why would Gypsy have bruising on her knuckles and possibly a healing cut if she had nothing to do with taking her mom's life? And when you start looking at the crime scene photos, and especially the pictures of Dee, I think it's glaringly obvious why the bruising and that possible cut is on Gypsy. I, as do a lot of people, think that Gypsy played a larger part in the murder of her mother. So Dee was stabbed 17 times in the back, and the back of her neck was sliced open. Nick admits to doing the neck slicing, and he admits to making 4 of the stab wounds. He says that he may have made more, but the brutality of it, it's a lot. The fact that Gypsy received a lesser sentence because of the suspected Munchausen's by proxy theory is just, it's insane to me. Munchausen's didn't come up until after it was thrown around as a theory. This wasn't something that Gypsy came up with on her own. She never said anything about abuse during the police interrogation. Nothing like that. The police later on suspected during their investigation that maybe she was a victim of Munchausen's by proxy, but that doesn't mean, just because they think that doesn't mean that that is the case. And again, I think, as do others, DeeDee fits malingering more so than she fits Munchausen's by proxy. And you also cannot diagnose somebody with Munchausen's by proxy after they're dead. So that's the other, there's, mm, so the police came up with that as a theory, and her lawyers just ran with it. You know, I'll give it to her lawyers. They are good. They did what they're supposed to do. They they defended their client. Do you know how many children grow up in abusive situations that turn around and kill their parents? Or how many children that are victims of Munchausen's by proxy take the life of one or both of their parents? As far as I'm aware, there are no cases recorded of a Munchausen's by proxy victim taking the life of one or both of their parents. It does, however, happen in abuse cases, but it is extremely rare. It only accounts for roughly 2% of murders that happen every year. When Gypsy is being interrogated by police on June the 15th in Wisconsin, she acts like she has no idea why she's there. She lies and she tries to act like she's this innocent little girl who has no clue, and she even plays up her fake high-pitched voice and she tries to gain sympathy. She even tried to lean into the "but I'm sick" act. It's honestly kind of pitiful watching her interrogation, and it's also very infuriating. And I have to tip my hat off to the detective because I don't know, I've seen people complain about him, but I thought he had an immense amount of patience with her because she was irritating the crap out of me with how much she was lying to him. And he kept giving her chance after chance after chance, just being very patient with her because he's trying to get the truth out of her. That's why he's being so nice and comforting to her. He's treating her with kid gloves. He's not stupid. He knows she's very much involved in the murder of her mother. And during this interrogation, like I mentioned, Gypsy never mentions abuse one time. Not a single time does she ever mention it. None of that became a thing until she got a lawyer, and they had to come up with a defense strategy for Gypsy. It's just another red flag for me in a sea of red flags when you start to look into this case. I think that Gypsy didn't say anything about abuse when she was being interrogated because that had nothing to do with the murder of her mother. The murder was because Gypsy wasn't allowed to be normal and she wasn't allowed to date. I truly think that Dee's life ended over a boy that Gypsy wasn't even in love with. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. And again, I want to believe Gypsy with her claims. I really do. It's so hard. It is so hard. And even if I did believe her claims of abuse, it does not excuse what she did at all, especially when we get into the crime scene photos, because it excuses it even less. If you think that Dee deserved what happened to her, I think your thoughts are disturbing and you should do your own research into this case. Don't watch the act, watch the police interrogation, watch her trial footage, watch some of Nick's, look at the crime scene photos, listen to the things that Gypsy says, watch the things that Gypsy does. Maybe do some inner work as well, because that is some really weird energy to be carrying around. Don't watch Mommy Dead and Dearest and think that it's a fact. Do your own research outside of that. And don't watch a bunch of videos on TikTok either. There's good people on this platform that have some really valid theories. There's some where I think it's like some of what you're saying I think could be true, but the other half of it's like, you know. Before we look at the crime scene, I want to look at Gypsy's birth chart and get into the numerology aspect of it. Just try to connect with it and understand Gypsy a little bit better. I won't go over her entire chart because, good God, this video is already too long. But I will be getting into like a surface level of her birth chart because I think it's very relevant to the case and to Gypsy as a whole. Anytime I show someone's birth chart in one of my videos, I will always preface it with this isn't solely who this person is, but it does give us good insight into who they are and how they can be, especially if they are not healed. They're unbalanced, which I suspect is very much the case with Gypsy. So Gypsyrose was born on the 27th of July, making her a Leo, which could account for her dominating side and her large amount of pride that she seems to carry. Her moon is in Aquarius, which, if she's unbalanced, like I believe that she has been for a very long time, that could lead her to feeling jealous of others and having fear and anger, which in turn could cause her to want to flee from those emotions. That could explain her alters that she had with Nick, like Ruby. I think doing that allowed her to channel and express those emotions head on and probably gave her a great sense of empowerment. Gypsy's Mercury is in Virgo, which I find interesting because that to me shows her materialistic side and how thorough and precise she can be. And I think for as tone deaf as Gypsy can be, she is very calculating. She knows what she is doing and she has a plan. That is obvious too with her entirety of her mom's murder because she planned out the entire thing. It was all planned out by her, down to the bus tickets. So she bought the bus tickets, she planned out everything, the hotels. I mean, she she planned everything. Without Gypsy, the murder would not have happened. So Gypsy's Venus is in Virgo, which is also interesting to me. This, I think, explains how she was so effortlessly able to cast aside the men in her life when they no longer benefit her in whatever way it may be. So you see this with Nick, and now you see her doing it to her husband Ryan, and I suspect this will probably also happen to Ken at some point. Her Mars is in Virgo. Again, another thing I found interesting in her chart. I feel like you see this aspect of her when she texts Nick. Gypsy works hard on Nick and is so determined to get what she wants out of him. The way that she relentlessly pressured him into participating in her mother's murder and how she orchestrated everything to make it happen, down to the bus tickets again, the hotel, the knife, the gloves, everything. Her Jupiter is in Leo, which explains her insufferable need for attention and acting like she is some sort of celebrity. She has a very diluted sense of herself and a sense of grandeur that I haven't seen too often. Her Saturn is in Aquarius. Again, that stood out to me because it indicates that she has a fierce need for independence and she may fight for liberation. But the real liberation that she should be seeking is from herself. It's not external factors that is really what she needs freedom from, like she probably thinks. It's actually herself. Her Uranus is in Capricorn, and that can indicate her ability to control and manipulate those around her. Her North Node is in Capricorn as well, indicating that Gypsy needs to grow up and develop more discipline. She needs to learn how to get rid of emotional addictions and not put herself first all the time. Basically, to stop acting like a hurt child who is looking to pin the blame on others for her own failures. She needs to face reality. Gypsy's Lilith is in Capricorn as well, which explains her deep-seated fear of failure. When she starts something, she's going to finish it. Also indicates a problem with authority. Lastly, her Cryon is in Leo, and that could account for her feeling that she isn't accepted by others and she doesn't get the recognition that she deserves. And I think it really shows in her personality because she's so wounded. She's such a victim and she acts like she's not getting recognized for it, but she has been recognized for it. So I also did Gypsy's numerology, which I find intriguing enough to include it in the video. So when you break down Gypsy's name in numerology, you get 94. And with that, if Gypsy's fully healed and balanced, I think that she could do a lot of good. I really do. But she has to, one, admit to herself that she has work to do internally, and then she has to actively participate in her own healing journey, which she has yet to do. If she is, she wouldn't be so unbalanced still. Since she is so unbalanced still, I think it really shows. And when you're unbalanced as a 94, you're gonna feel like a black sheep, like you're always left out, and you're gonna have a deep desire to be a part of the group, but you're always being kept out. And it also indicates that there's a lot of inner conflict and turmoil. I fully believe in prison reform, and I think prisons should offer more services to inmates to help them with their mental health. But even if they did offer that, the work comes back on the individual. Are you willing to put that work in to look at yourself, flaws and all, embrace the negative aspects of yourself, and start making positive changes? Gypsy said that she took part of group therapy in prison, but that group therapy is so different than one-on-one therapy. I've been in group therapy before, and I've actually been in one-on-one talk therapy for the past 7 years now, and there's such a difference between the two. If Gypsy really went through extensive abuse with DeeDee, she should have never gone to group therapy to start. She should have, in my opinion, gone straight to one-on-one, like behavioral cognitive therapy. Group therapy is more about working on what behavior issues you have that stem from your trauma. If you haven't already talked about your traumas, I think it's hard for you to identify where your triggers and your behaviors are even coming from. And so in the one-on-one therapy, it's a more tailored experience. You may not necessarily work on coping skills and mechanisms, but it's more one-on-one. It's more tailored, like I said. So Gypsy claims to have severe PTSD, which is also referred to as complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which also happens to be another similarity that I share with Gypsy. I've been diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder from extensive amount of trauma throughout my life. So again, I want to believe Gypsy with her claims, but it's so hard. Like I said already, you can't be lying and telling the truth at the same time. You can't do these things and expect people to believe everything that's going to be coming out of your mouth. I will believe this about everybody, including myself. Your trauma does not justify your shitty actions. It does not. It never will. It doesn't justify lack of accountability. It doesn't justify your lack of responsibility in your own healing and to just be a decent person. I question the level of abuse that she went through, and that feels horrible to say. Something about this entire story and how she acts, it does not add up for me. And that is the same thing that other trauma survivors have been saying. Something about how she's acting, the things that she has said, it just, something's not quite right here. I can't put my finger on it. I think everyone's traumas are very important, but accountability is also very important. I don't want to minimize anything that she really did go through because, like I said earlier, anyone that has lived through childhood trauma and abuse, they know how complicated and insidious it can be. So just because I have suspicions, it doesn't make it a fact. I want to reiterate that. My problem will always come back to how Gypsy is as a person, though. That's where a lot of this is tied up for me. If she didn't contradict herself and how she conducts herself, I wouldn't be making this video. If she wasn't out here on multiple social media platforms with her stepmother bullying creators, I wouldn't care. But I do because she can't stop herself. It's like she can't help herself. Gypsy has a great support system in her father and in her half sister. And, she's got that support, and that's more than what a lot of people get post release from prison. So when you get into the numerology of the day of what I believe is to be the murder, June the 9th, 2015, you get the number 47. And when looking into the unhealed aspects of the number 47, you get someone or a situation that is overly sensitive, an unrealistic worldview, something that soothes the emotions with addictions. And Gypsy was addicted to her mom's pain pills at this point. You get self-pity, you get low self-esteem, you get lively fantasies that lead to a distorted and unrealistic perception of reality. You get distrust of others, unresolved childhood traumas, creating new traumas for oneself, hopes that others will take charge and save them, lost in emotions that fill up their entire life. I read that number and my mouth fell open. Given the context of everything, I was just like, wow, holy crap. All right, we're about to head into the crime scene photos, and I am usually not squeamish, but I've been through my own traumatic experiences with an extremely graphic death, and I've looked at a lot of crime scene photos and accident photos, and let me tell you, these photos of DeeDee are extremely hard to look at, but I think it's extremely important to see these photos given the context of everything. My opinion had already changed prior to looking at these photos, but then seeing the photos really solidified my thoughts and how I think that Gypsy played a much larger role in taking her mother's life. So this is your last chance to skip ahead if you need to do so. I will count down from 5, and then I will start to get into this so you can have a little bit of time to pause and skip ahead. So 5, 4, 3, two, one. I'm going to start off with a general crime scene photos of the house, and then I'll get into the more graphic photos with DeeDee. So DeeDee's autopsy has been sealed because Nick is trying to appeal his sentencing. So until he gets a retrial, we will not be able to see the autopsy results. So all we have to go off of is the crime scene photos. All right, here we go. This first photo is a shot of their living room. This is another shot of the living room. Same side of the living room, just more to the left of the living room is shown. You can see just how sick Dee was at this time because it's June and the Christmas tree is still up. You can see all the bags of items that they have bagged up, stuff that I think was donated to them through their scam. And you can also see that there's 3 wheelchairs. There's 2 manual ones that I would say are more of your like low end manual wheelchairs. In the middle, there's an electric wheelchair that is underneath a pile. I find it curious that Gypsy didn't help maintain the home given that she wasn't physically unable to do so. Everyone wants to throw blame around on DeeDee, but Gypsy was 24 at the time the murder happened. She was a grown adult. Even her room looks like this. So I don't know if Gypsy has hoarding tendencies too, or if she just became so apathetic towards Dee and built up so much resentment that she just didn't care anymore. Either way, I find it interesting and telling of Gypsy's headspace at the time. So this is a photo of Gypsy taken in the same living room, the same area, just to show comparison. The photo was taken sometime after they moved into the house. So their house didn't always look like this. And with DeeDee's health taking a dive in the years leading up to her death, I would think that is what caused all of the clutter that you're seeing. She was physically incapable of keeping up with the house at that point, and Gypsy wasn't helping clearly. I really have to question if some of the hoarding claims made by Gypsy is just another way to make her mom seem like crazy. I have to wonder. So this next photo is basically the other side of the living room, like facing back of where the last photo was looking. You see a small dining area that flows out from the living room and goes into the kitchen. And you can see a cleaning bottle on the floor next to the vacuum cleaner. I think it's one of the bottles that Gypsy and I believe Nick used to clean up some of the blood after the murder. Here's a photo of the kitchen. Again, nothing really to note aside from the clutter and just the odd things on the floor. It's really just kind of disheveled. Odd looking. Everything's kind of out of place. Here's a shot of the hallway. Again, we can see a cleaning bottle left behind by Gypsy and Nick after they try to clean up DeeDee's blood. The next photo to get into is a closet in the hallway that was used to store mostly medicine and some other supplies. Looking at this photo, it is immediately obvious to me that they were not largely using the medicine that was prescribed to either one of them, aside from DeeDee's pain pills that she was prescribed. A lot of it looks untouched to me or barely touched. Also, what is with the medical gowns on the top shelf? Just odd looking at this closet. It's oddly organized and cluttered at the same time. Clearly she was hoarding medicine because that is such an unusual amount of medicine for 1 or even 2 people to have, sick or not, and multiples of everything. It's like a little pharmacy in there. I think a lot of people, upon looking at this photo, will feel outraged towards the doctors because of the amount of medicine that they're seeing. And that's a normal reaction to have. But let's remember that DeeDee was able to steal multiple RX pads from doctors' offices, and that would probably explain why she has such a stocked medicine cabinet. Looking at this closet, I really don't think the Gypsy was being drugged, and again, I'm not the only one who believes this after looking through the crime scene photos. I can see prescription mouthwash, cough syrup, and a ton of albuterol inhalers, and I think general aspirin bottles. I think this shows the exact opposite of any claims of Gypsy being drugged and over medicated because most of these meds aren't actually being used. And I wonder what the expiration dates were on everything in the closet and how much of it was actually expired. The other thing that I noticed was the padlock latch on the trim of the door frame. So Dia was locking up the medicine closet from Gypsy. Why else would that be on the door? And we know that Gypsy was taking Dee's pills with her in as far back as 2011 when she ran off to be with Dan because Gypsy said she did. She also took her mom's pain pills after the murder when she left with Nick. Something interesting to note. So this is a photo of Gypsy's bedroom. Again, another cluttered room, which I find interesting considering this is her bedroom. I know after the murder she did try to make it look like she didn't live in there, so I have to wonder if she tried to make her room look worse or if this is just how it normally looked. Only thing I can note from this is that she's a Doctor Who fan from the TARDIS on her end table, and that she's a Star Wars fan from the Darth Vader pillow on her bed. All right, we are about to get into the graphic photos of Dee. If you need to pause, skip ahead. I'm gonna count down from 5. Give you time to pause and skip ahead. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. This is how Dee was found on her bed, roughly 4 days after she was murdered. Before leaving the house, Gypsy turned the AC up to try and help slow down the decomp process. This is after the coroner removed the sheets and the blanket. You can see bruising on the back of Dee's right thigh and another bruise on the outer portion of her right calf as well. There's also a very odd V-shaped mark on her right butt cheek. Here you can see the coroner lifting up Dee's nightgown, showing the 17 stab wounds to her back, along with bloody fingerprints on her back. Here's another shot of the stab wounds on her back with a better resolution. Again, you can see the bloody handprint on her back in the lower left portion of the photo. Looking at the wounds themselves, you can see how some of them are darker and more bloody than the others, indicating to me some of these wounds happened when her heart was either slowing down or had already stopped completely. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am not a coroner, nor am I a medical examiner. I've never gone to school for either of these things for any length of time, so I could be wrong. But the way that I understand multiple stab wounds that are seen in victims, if someone is stabbed after their heart is slowed down or stopped pumping blood, you will see the kind of stab wounds that are seen in the lower portion of the photo, the ones that look more fleshy. Now, I don't have the autopsy report, so I would really like to see that whenever it does become accessible, because I want to know how deep those lower stab wounds are. If they aren't as deep as the other wounds that you see with more pooling, that could explain why they look more fleshy and have less blood. But when we look at some of the other photos, it just raises more questions for me. These photos are going to become progressively more disturbing as far as brutal deaths go. I find this to be very brutal and just excessive. It's not as gory as other crime scenes that I've seen or accident photos, but like I said, it's the brutality of it. It disturbs me what happened to DeeDee. These crime scene photos have haunted me more so than any others that I have looked at thus far. I will leave it at that. This photo may not be disturbing to others, but it is to me. Something about the way Dee's hands are positioned and the way her fingers are curling in makes me so sick to my stomach. You can tell how much she suffered in her final moments, and not just in the wounds in her body, just this photo of her hands. It's the most telling sign to me how painful it was for her and probably how scared she was in her final moment. It looks like she's frozen in a wincing or bracing reaction from the pain. And aside from that, her pink nail polish is very visible. And it's the same pink nail polish that Gypsy painted her nails following the murder while she got ready for Nick. It is also the same pink nail polish that she later claimed she and her mom painted together a day or two before the murder, and that they had, quote, made up. But I don't believe that they made up, and I question if Gypsy really painted their nails together, since Gypsy had already talked about wanting to paint her nails in the bathroom for Nick while he's committing the murder. It's one of many contradictions that Gypsy has stated. One other thing that I noticed, and YouTuber Candace Starr noticed, check out her videos, and I'll put a link down below for her channel. But if you haven't already, look at Dee's left wrist. The pooling of the blood at her wrist like that, it looked like she was bound. And you can see what looks like white finger impressions on her arm right above where that pooling is seen. Now, Nick says he got on top of Dee and stabbed her in the back. He never said anything about tying her up and restraining her. So also what stands out for me is the blood inside of her palm on her left hand and her fingers. And now look at Dee's cheek. Why is there blood traveling towards her, like her neck and her ear area, away from her mouth? You can tell that it's traveling away from the mouth. So this photo is after the coroner has flipped Dee from the prone position that she was found in to photograph her and examine her in the supine position. You can see where the blood pooled in her legs and the swirl patterns from what I am guessing is probably caused by some type of a mattress topper. And you can see how the blood pooled in her abdomen as she laid on her stomach. And now obviously full rigor mortis has set in. About 4 or 5 days have gone by between Dee being murdered and her body being discovered. But the way in which her arms are positioned bothers me. It's like she was restrained. I don't know. Maybe that's just how her arms were frozen after the fact. But for so I keep coming back to her being restrained. Her hands being something is going on with her wrist. She's being bound in some manner. The pulling in her arms and her face are noticeably darker than what you see in the pulling in her legs, and I have to question if that is due to the pressure of someone being on top of her as she bled out and her heart stopped. And the other thing that stands out is her bloody nose. And again, the direction of that blood that is coming from her nose. If she was really on her stomach during the entire assault with Nick, why is there blood trailing from her nose and down towards her cheek and like her neck? To me, it looks like she had been on her back. Somebody broke her nose. That is where the blood is coming from, out of her nose, is because her nose has been broken prior to her being stabbed in the back. Okay, so this was the worst. This was the worst photo for me to look at. I've blacked out Dee's eyes because no one needs to see that on here. I had to look at it enough when examining these photos. But the coroner is looking for signs of bugs in her eyes to determine a time frame for when DeeDee was murdered and to see if there were signs of strangulation that happened, because blood vessels would have broke in her eyes if she had been strangled. So I want to focus on her nose here. Looking at the bridge of her nose, it looks to me like it was busted and broken. And I think that is so significant because Nick never mentions flipping Dee over or striking her in the face, breaking her nose, nothing like that. He never mentions that. In Gypsy's police interrogation 6 days after the murder, her hands show signs of bruises that are healing on her index and the middle finger knuckles on both of her hands, as well as, like I mentioned, there's a small cut on her right knuckle. And so I want to know how those got there. What the hell happened to Dee's nose? I really want to see that autopsy report. I have so many questions and a lot of suspicions that Gypsy attacked her mother before Nick got there. Nick can only remember stabbing Dee 4 times. He says that those stabs were deep. Dee was stabbed 17 times in the back. Nick did say that he had stabbed her a few more times, but he didn't count those because they were shallow cuts. Okay, so let's assume that the fleshier looking cuts that we see on Dee's back are the shallow ones. So we won't even count those. So we'll just count 4 of the greater pooling areas as being 4 of the cuts that Nick made. Well, that doesn't account for 13 of her other stab wounds. And that is why other people think that Gypsy probably had a bigger role to play in the unaliving of her mother. It doesn't add up to me too because of the brutality of it. The brutality of it, it's so personal. And to me, that doesn't add up with Nick being the sole perpetrator because the relationship isn't there for it to be so personal for him. Like, yes, he is mad at Dee for what he's perceiving to be extreme abuse. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that Nick stabbed her that many times. He does admit to cutting the back of her neck. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a medical examiner, I'm not a coroner. I just have a deep curiosity. And I feel like looking at these photos, something is off. There is something off, and I cannot put my finger on it. So the next photo I am going to show the cut on her neck. It is very graphic. So I'm gonna do another countdown in case anybody wants to skip it. So we're gonna go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So aside from the depth of the cut, my immediate thing that I notice is how fleshy this wound is. If that cut was made while Dee was alive, I would think that there would be more blood in the wound. I have this deep suspicion that Gypsy was on top of Dee prior to being there and was punching her in the nose, at the very least. Just like I said, something doesn't sit right with me looking at these photos. And I really think that Gypsy attacked her mom and possibly already stabbed her in the back as well. So prior to Dee's murder, Gypsy had become physical with her mother on several occasions. After one of the 2 times that Gypsy had run away from home to be with Dan, after she had found out that she was actually 19, Dee brought her back home, and apparently sometime after that she bought a BB gun and they had had another fight. Gypsy picked up the BB gun thinking that it was a real gun and unloaded the entire thing on DeeDee, hitting her. And if it had been a real gun, she would have died right then and there. And Gypsy openly admits to being surprised when she realized that it wasn't a real gun. So she picked that up and she thought she was, pew-pewing her mom. And Gypsy tries to say that she's not capable of having taken her mom's life. And I think that incident right there shows exactly how capable Gypsy really was of taking her mom's life. Nick also said that they discussed multiple ways in which to take Dee's life, one of which was to make it look like she took her own life. Nick claims that they chose a knife and to stab her because he thought that it would be the quickest way for her death. Quick, easy death. And I think we know that's not true. She did not have a quick and easy death. She had a what looks like a very painful, brutal, and probably a very disorienting and terrifying death. And I'm very confused why Gypsy didn't think faking a suicide would work. She had more than enough medication in that house to accidentally cause an OD to make it look like Dee took her own life or that she accidentally did it. You know, I feel like that would have been the much easier route. I don't understand why Gypsy thought that stabbing her mom would be the best way. I will never be able to wrap my head around it. There was no need to involve Nick unless she wanted to pin the blame on somebody else. It couldn't solely all come back on her, so maybe that's why she did it. She had to have somebody else there to pin the blame on, or at least to share the blame with. After Gypsy took her plea deal, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and she was sentenced to just 10 years in prison, while Nick pled not guilty to first-degree murder. He was ultimately found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with an additional 25 years added to his sentence. In early December of 2023, Nick's lawyer filed an appeal for his sentence based on him not being able to properly be represented by his initial lawyer, who defended him during his trial. I absolutely think that Nick's initial lawyer failed him and did not properly fight for his client during his trial. And that's not to say that I think Nick should be released, because I don't. I think Nick should be incarcerated for the rest of his life. He's too easily manipulated given the right circumstances, making him a real danger to society. I think Nick needs to be in a mental health facility of some sort, not prison for the rest of his life. He needs to be housed elsewhere if he's ever going to thrive. I do think that Nick is guilty of first-degree murder. I don't think that he should have gotten a second-degree murder charge like what his lawyer is trying to fight for him right now. But I do think that the injustice that he had with his first lawyer was enough to grant him a retrial. So I really do hope that he gets a retrial, because he was dealt such a bad card. Such a bad card. Yeah, I think what he did fits first degree murder and not second degree, because even though he was trying to talk Gypsy out of the murder, he still planned it with her for months and he carried it out. I guess Gypsy did manipulate him into it, and she just kept insisting that taking her mom's life was the only way that they could be together. And that is why I think his mental capacity should be taken into account. But at the end of the day, he knew what he was doing was wrong and what the outcome would be. And that is why I think first degree murder fits his situation better than second degree murder. So something that happens a lot with cases like this, not all the facts were given during the trial, skewing the perception of what really happened for the jury to be able to give a fair judgment, mixed with Nick's lawyer not accurately representing and defending him. And Nick was absolutely failed by the justice system. On that same note, I think Gypsy was given too light of a sentence, because the plea deal was given to her based on emotions and not the facts of the case. And also because of the political atmosphere of the county that she was in at that time. And DeeDee would not be dead if it wasn't for Gypsyrose. Period.
Call a spade, honey.
Look at the Menendez brothers. They were two adults who murdered their parents under the assumption of abuse. And when they easily could have just left their parents' home and continued on with their lives. But they didn't, and now they are both serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. So Gypsy ultimately ended up serving 80% of her sentence, and she was paroled from prison during the latter part of December of 2023. Prior to being released from prison, Gypsy had several relationships with men who wrote her while she was in prison. She became engaged, she was single, I think she became engaged again, and ultimately she married her current husband, whom she's now divorcing from, while she was in prison. As do others, and especially with how things have played out for Gypsy in the public and her Lifetime show, I think that Gypsy primarily married Ryan, a man she didn't really know. I mean, how could she know him while she was in prison? It just, So she marries Ryan while she's still incarcerated in what I think was an attempt to make herself look better and that she has a good and stable environment to go to if she was released on parole. And I think that helped her gain parole, along with her immediate family and extended family bashing DeeDee in the documentary series Mommy Dead and Dearest. More false sympathy that was garnered for Miss Jip Jip. Upon release from prison, Gypsy was immediately filming her TV show for Lifetime, and she had podcasts lined up. And in general, she cannot stay off of social media and out of the limelight. She claims that she doesn't want the spotlight on her, but she's the one that keeps putting herself in the spotlight.
Why is what I do so important? Why must I always be the focal point of attention? Let me just be. Let me live. What's Cass's belly?
Oh, it's nothing.
Is it about me?
Why must you always be the focal point of attention? Why can't you just be? Why can't you live?
All the news that has been coming out about her, it's all been leaked from her or her stepmother or other people that are immediately around her, but it seems like it's mostly come for her, especially if it's coming from TMZ. It's obvious how poorly calculated Gypsy has been since her release. I think she's being sneaky and smart, but she's so delusional. And others in her life are feeding into it. It took a whopping 3 months before she decided to leave her husband once she was released from prison. Of no real merit, it seems like, to leave him. Like I said, I think she used him to help her get out of prison a little bit earlier than what she was supposed to. And very much like how she used Nick. Gypsy didn't even get a divorce from her husband before she went back to an ex and is now pregnant by that ex. In the show, you see her basically cheating on her spouse with the ex. Why do this? Why do any of this? And so the week that I was finishing up this video, after teasing about being pregnant with Ryan on her Instagram a few months prior, and after leaving Ryan and getting with Ken, Gypsy has announced that she is 11 weeks pregnant. Like I said, Gypsy is, this whole thing is messy. It is so messy.
Act the fool, girl. Act the fool.
This girl, and I mean girl, because she's 2 years older than me, but she's acting like she's 13 or 14 with her decision making. And like I said, she's so messy. She's very impulsive. Even if she realized upon living with her husband that they weren't actually compatible, if she gave one single fuck about Ryan, she would have addressed that to him. Like, hey, I don't think living with you is that great. Or, she didn't even give herself time to just be a person. And she rushed into that marriage while she was in prison. Now she's out. She's never lived on her own before. I don't get it. Why isn't she allowing herself to grow and to flourish? Something does not sit right with me. And I really don't think that she cared about Ryan, or else, like, why did she leaves her husband and she immediately jumps into bed with the ex and gets pregnant by him? I just cannot. And she's not even divorced yet. She's filed for a divorce. And when she filed for a divorce, she had the audacity to ask for spousal support. I cannot. Gypsy isn't making sound decisions for herself, her future, and now for her child's future, or anyone's future who is entangled with her. She's only been out of prison for 7 months and she was pregnant by May. Like I said, she's not given herself the time to just be, to just exist outside of what happened with her mom going to prison. She's living life as fast and as hard as she can, and for all the wrong reasons, in my opinion. And she is so delusional. She's already been posting baby bump photos at 11 weeks. Baby bump photos. She even made a registry already. I really think Gypsy is repeating karmatic patterns here. She keeps doing it in her relationships, and she's already started doing it with her baby. I really, really hope that this child can change her for the better, but I fear that it won't happen, and I have genuine concerns for this child. I don't mean it in a malicious way. I think our children are tied to our karma and they're meant to transform us and to change unhealed parts in us. You know, they help us grow, be better people. And I fear what could trigger Gypsy because she has little to no self-control. And she seemingly finds that funny, which is also concerning. Like it's some funny quirk of hers instead of something that she needs to work on. Like, girl, come on. Don't do that. She openly admits on her YouTube video that she put out about her pregnancy that she's been very temperamental towards Ken and very hormonal. And it's only 11 weeks into the pregnancy, girl. What are you doing? I'm not the only one who thinks this either. It seems like she might be justifying abusive behavior towards Ken through the lens of, I'm pregnant, it's my hormones, I'm so crazy. No, something again doesn't fit right. It doesn't fit right with me. I can't imagine how she's going to act when she's sleep deprived and she's dealing with a newborn baby. God forbid this baby has colic. You know, and she's already using this child to get attention and to grift to get free shit. So again, she's playing out karmatic patterns here. I don't think she realizes it. And I fear too, if she becomes jealous of this baby in any capacity, that baby's going to get more attention than you, whether you like it or not. It's just a fact. Babies, little kids need a lot of attention. And again, Gypsy has not given herself the space to just be, and she's immediately thrown herself into being pregnant and to becoming a mother, and that is insane to me. And because of her chromosome disorder, there's a 50-50 chance of her baby having the same chromosome disorder. And I'm not the only one who fears this too. Other people are worried that if the baby does, or even if the baby doesn't, she's going to use that as something to hold over Ken, kind of like how her mother did to her dad. It's going to be interesting seeing this play out, and I kind of don't. I don't want to watch it play out. I want her to heal and to leave us all alone. Just to be a good mom and to go away. Just slink back into oblivion. We don't need to hear about you anymore, Gypsy. Please, please stop. If you care about your well-being, if you care about your child's well-being at all, even 1% of giving a fuck, you will stop all of this, please. Because if you don't, these things are just going to keep repeating, and it's not going to be good. It's not. No matter how you try to spin it, it will not be good because you have to do the work. You have to change. So it all comes back to. Everything all circles back around to Miss GypsyRose. If Gypsy actually cared about her healing and her overall well-being, she wouldn't have rushed into relationship after relationship. She wouldn't have gotten pregnant immediately, basically leaving prison, as I suspect was on purpose, even though she claims that it wasn't and that it was an accident. I don't believe that. And I don't think anybody else really believes it. Shit doesn't add up. Again, common theme here with Gypsy, things not adding up. And if she truly cared about her betterment, she wouldn't be out here doing all this, defending herself in the comment sections. Her stepmom is even doing it. Gypsy, if you're watching this, I'm sorry to break it to y'all, but you chose this in so many ways and so many times, GypsyRose. You've chosen all of this path that you were on. You chose it when you murdered your mother. You chose it in the lies that you told and continue to tell. You've chosen it in every interview you've given, every podcast you've done, every book deal you've signed, TV deals, all of it. You chose it when you yourself have continuously put yourself out here, and especially with how you treated Ryan and how everything is currently playing out for you in your life. If you didn't have a guilty conscience, you wouldn't be out here defending yourself so fiercely in people's comments and mistreating people how you've been doing. You would take accountability if you cared. You wouldn't feel the need to constantly defend yourself. You just wouldn't, because it wouldn't matter to you. To yourself and everyone around you, and especially that baby, a huge favor, the biggest favor you could give anybody. Heal. I think you have the capacity to heal. I really do. Heal, have some accountability, Move forward with your life. Everybody's calling you out on your behaviors. I don't think that's really gotten through to you yet. Just end the charade. It started with your mother and it can end with you. I really think you have the capacity to heal and change. I really do. You have good qualities in your birth chart. You do. You just have to push yourself through that threshold. You gotta heal. Because otherwise, you are doomed to repeat these patterns over and over again. If you believe in reincarnation as well, then you're going to end up reincarnating with DeeDee a lot until you heal all of this because of what you did to her in this lifetime. You will reincarnate with her again. She may not be your mother, you may be her mother the next time. Maybe she will do something horrible to you in return so you can learn from it. I don't know. But I guarantee you, if reincarnation is real, you will be with her again. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was very long and kind of very pointed. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think Gypsy should be free today? How do you feel about Nick's sentencing? Do you think that Nick received a fair trial? How do you feel about Gypsy's behaviors since she's been out of prison? Let me know your thoughts down below. If you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up to help boost it in the algorithm. And if you haven't already as well, please subscribe so you can stay up to date to when I post to my channel. I'll catch you in the next one.
Call a spade, honey. Keep making content. Oh, honey, I am so not threatened by you. My man wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. My man with a 10-foot pole. My man wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. My man with a 10-foot pole. Last time I checked, you don't have a man. You don't have a man. You don't have a man. Last time I checked, you don't have a man. You don't have a man. You don't have a man.